All right, guys, a couple of housekeeping chores really quick that I want to get to that don't have anything to do with retouching, and then we'll jump back into retouching really quick. There was 2 questions that have been asked. The first one is actually how to format a hard drive, so I'm going to show you how to do that. This is they've changed this in system 10.11. I'm not running 10.11. We can talk about that, but this is how it happens. Everything before 10.11, it's still the same process in 10.11. I'm talking about the Macintosh software system, but the dialog, the program itself looks different. What we're doing is exactly the same, but the program looks different. So I'm going to go through it here. If you are working on 10.11, let me know, and I'll get together with you, and we can. I'll show you how to do it there as well. But at any rate, in everything before 10.11, which is what I'm running right now, I'm in 10.10. You come here to the disk utility. To find the disk utility, it's actually in your application folder. All the way down at the bottom is your utilities folder. Inside the utilities folder is where you'll find disk utility, and you double click this guy to actually get it to launch, and it will open up, and it looks like this. The new version of it is a whole lot more colorful. At any rate, in this left side over here, you will see the drives that you've actually got. I've got 2 hard drives on inside of my laptop right now, and an external one. The one up here that's listed as boot is a solid state that's in here. This one down here, you don't see it because the partitions have been unmounted. But what you care about would be an external hard drive, and that's what this guy is right here. I'm not going to actually go ahead and do the complete process here because I've got stuff on this hard drive that I want to keep, but I'll show you everything that you need to know about it. So you actually select the hard drive in this left-hand panel over here, and then you'll get a series of tab options here across the top. You want to pick partition, and then you need to pick the number of partitions that you want. You can do multiple partitions. What partitioning to a hard drive does, it divides your computer into what appear to be multiple drives. They're not really multiple drives. They're actually still one. So if you look over right here, you can see on mine, it looks like I've got one hard drive over here called boot drive and another one over here called data. Those are actually, it's a single hard drive. All I've done is chopped it up into spaces, and those spaces are called partitions. If you want to do that to your hard drive, you click here and you'll see you can do up to 16 partitions on a hard drive. If you don't want it, if you want it to just be one single drive, you would actually just select one partition. When you do that, you will actually see here that you can name the partition. If you were to do 2 partitions, for instance, you can actually click on one and change its size. You can actually type in a number right here. So I've got a 1 terabyte drive right now that I am saying I want to be in 2 partitions. These are now equal partitions. They're both 500 gigabytes. You can change that value. You can actually click on this. Well, you used to be able to click on this and drag. Yep, there it is. If you get the little double-headed arrow to stick, you can actually drag these things in real time. Instead, you can simply type in the value that you wanted. So if I say I only want this first one to be 250 gigabytes, the second one will be 750, and so on and so on. But again, if you're doing this and you're not trying to partition, you would do a single partition. It's the full 1 terabyte in size. You can change the name of it. This is important, though, what you pick here for your formatting. If you're operating in an OS alone, you would pick this Mac OS Extended Journaled. If you want this to work on a Windows machine, you pick this MS-DOS FAT. This MS-DOS FAT will work on both a Macintosh and a Windows machine, although, Christina, you're the one who's got stuff formatted in FAT, right? It's not the friendliest in a Mac world. It still works, but if you're only working in Mac, you don't want to pick this this MS-DOS. This again will allow your hard drive to work on both a Windows machine and a Macintosh. But unless you have a compelling reason to do that, you do not want to pick this one. You would pick this OS X Extended Journaled. That's the one you would pick. One last thing you need to do before you say OK to this, you need to click on Options. And in this Options, you can actually tell how you want the partition table to be. In the Macintosh world, you've only got 2 options. It's this GUID or Apple Partition. Apple Partition, you would format a drive for a Macintosh that was 10 or 15 years old, a PowerPC Mac. Nobody in this room has probably ever seen one of these, much less is using one of these. It's still, if you do pick this partitioning scheme, you still can use it on a current day Mac, but you cannot use it to start your current day Mac. If you want your hard drive to actually be the most flexible of all and actually be able to start up your Mac if you want, you need to pick this GUID partition table. If you are building a Windows partition, if you are clicking on this and you are doing Windows here instead, you would actually also want to change this to this master boot record. This is to actually do a Windows computer. So for Windows, you would pick this, and then again, you would pick that FAT. But for a typical Mac, this GUID partition table, you say okay. This, again, you would put in whatever name you want for this. It would be this extended journal, and then you simply hit apply, and it will format your hard drive. It will erase everything on your hard drive, so do not do this to something that you do not have a copy of, because it will completely erase this hard drive, but it will format it for your Mac. In my case, I'm going to cancel out of this because I'm not reformatting this. And I'm just going to close that guy up. Okay, there was another question, and it was somebody got offered the chance to actually do a retouching job and said, how much should I charge? How should I actually be charging the retouching job? And this is what I can tell you. The best thing that I can tell you is typically you would want to try to figure out how long it's going to take you to do the retouching job, but you do not want to quote an hourly rate. Because the truth of an hourly rate is this. Let's say somebody approaches me and says, I've got a retouching job for you to do, and I'm going to quote them an hourly rate. Well, then it is in my best interest to go out and buy the slowest computer I can get my hands on, to get the oldest version of Photoshop I can lay my hands on, to really try to cripple myself as much as I possibly can, because then it's going to take me longer to do the retouching job and I'll make more money. Quoting time is not how you want to do it. What you really want to do is figure out your retouching time. How long is it going to take me to do it? And then quote the job as a flat fee. So if you say to yourself, what are you worth an hour? Well, minimum wage in my life is 15 bucks. There would be no reason to go anything cheaper than that. But that's somebody who's flipping hamburgers. That's not what you're doing. You know, so what is your retouching rate? What can a student in this class actually expect to command? Well, that has all to do with your retouching skills. How good are they? If they're really good and you're confident you can do the work and you stand behind it, that puts you in the $25, $35, $45, $50 an hour range to do that. At $50 an hour and an 8-hour day, you make $400. Is that what you should be living on? Can you live on that? Is that a good wage to do that? If you really don't know the answers to that question, I hate to do this because I'm not advertising this. But I have a business class a business workshop that I do here at Columbia specifically to answer these very questions. You need to figure out what your cost of living what you need to make. You need to work through all of those to really figure out what you should actually be charging. But a typical rate for a typical student at this stage of the game, who once you've graduated from this class, what should you be able to command? My sense would you should be able to command somewhere between $35 and $70 an hour. That's what I think you should be able to command on doing a job. So then you look at the job and you say, how long will it really take me to do this? And you look at the job and you say, it's a 2-hour job. I'm at $70 an hour. I'm going to round it up 150 bucks. That's what I'm going to charge you. But the reason you want to do this as a flat rate is that then you're really good at Photoshop and you're really quick because you listen to all the stuff I told you about how to speed up your Photoshop and do it really fast, and you get it done in an hour instead of 2 hours, but you still get paid for the 2 hours. So now instead of getting paid at $70 an hour, you're getting paid $140 an hour because you did the retouching job in half the time. The biggest caveat about doing this, though, is that when you do a retouching job and you turn it into a client and they say, well, you didn't do this, this, and this. You quoted me $150, but you didn't take that pimple out. You didn't trim her waist down. You didn't fix her nose. You didn't clean up her eyes. And you say to them, we never talked about doing that. And this happens all the time. Bait and switch, bait and switch, bait and switch. When you're doing a retouching job, you sit down with a person, you open up a Photoshop file, you put a blank layer on top of the Photoshop file, and you write notes, retouching notes on that Photoshop file. So let's actually do this. I'll show you how it works. The next file I want you guys to open up, because we need to get back to this part of our conversation as well, is the gradient 2. We're only going to look at this gradient for 10 minutes, so don't worry about it. It's a more colorful version. You can close up gradient 1. the one that only had the red stripe on it. You do not need to save it. We do have Gradient 2 that's sitting out here right now. So what you would do if you were going to retouch this is I would put a blank layer on here. I would go to my pencil tool, which again, if you click on the flyout menu for the brush tool, it's the pencil tool right here. Hit the D key to get your foreground and background colors to default to their normal ones. Grab your pen, and let's say they wanted you to make the red stripe green. So you would put on here, you would actually, again, I'm working on a blank layer right here, not my image, but a blank layer, and I would put a line out here and say, turn to green. And you go through and you make all your retouching notes like this. Then you initial that and your client initials this. So then when you go back and they say, well, I know I said turn that one to green, but I also said turn the blue one to black, and you say, well, I don't see it on my retouching notes. I'll be happy to do this for you, but it means I'm taking the file back and it's going to cost you another $140. Right? Get it in writing. Are there any questions about this? Okay, if you've done all that, you can actually throw that second layer away. That's not what I wanted to do. So I'm going to talk to you now about the most indignant thing I find in the whole wide world. How many people actually pay for Photoshop? Oh, I shouldn't ask that question. How much money do you think Adobe is making a year on Photoshop? A whole lot of money, right? And the amazing thing about it is Photoshop is founded on one simple idea, and it's one simple idea alone. Just one. These two brothers, Thomas Knoll and John Knoll, they were software engineers, and they came up with a program. It was actually a program to run a scanner, and I forget the original name of it. It's what ultimately morphed into Photoshop. But their idea was this. Their idea was, we're going to take, and it started out in black and white. They essentially the idea of a mask. That's what they came up with. And what they said with a mask is exactly the thing that we've been talking about here. If you've got a white part of your mask, nothing comes through. I mean, everything comes through. If you've got a black part of your mask, nothing comes through. And what they did that would allow them to work on graphics like this is they said, if we can build a mask that will control tonality, then we can use that. If you can manipulate that mask, you can then manipulate the tonality of your image. And that was it. And they said, we'll do it in 8-bit, and we'll set the values of that. 0 will be black, 255 will be white, and we can build a mask. Now, in color, the same thing happens. And so what I want to talk about, and it's this basic idea, everything that happens in Photoshop functions as a consequence of only manipulating 3 masks. If you're working in grayscale, you're manipulating only 1 mask. And it's these things called channels. So what I want you to do is look at these channels right here. And what you'll see in this channel, this gradient that I've actually built up, it's the same gradient as before. It starts at black on one side, it goes to white on the other side. It's got a pure red layer, pure green layer, and a pure blue layer here. That's all that's actually happening here. But look at the 3 masks that are the 3 channels that exist down here, the RGB ones. This RGB composite, the one that you see in color that is at the very top, is actually not a true channel. It is strictly a preview. It's really not a true channel. In every single channel that exists in the world, you can only have grayscale. You cannot have color. Color does not exist in channels. And you can see it right here. In our red channel, look at what is happening in our red channel. There is a mask that's sitting in the red channel. You can think of the red channel as this. It is a brilliant red light that's shining. And there's a mask in front of that red light, and it controls where the red actually falls or doesn't fall. So you can see, if you look at the red strip right here, there's this area of the red in my image. If you look in the channel, you'll see right there is the red is pure white. Does that make sense? And so what it's doing is it's letting all of the red light hit my image and be a part of my image. But then look at the green and the blue in the same area in the green channel. That is completely black. There is no green light in here at all. And then finally in the blue channel, it's the exact same thing. If you hover your mouse over the red bar that's in your image, look up at your RGB readouts. These RGB readouts are exactly reflective of this mask. In the red channel, in this area, my mask, my red mask right here is pure white, letting in all of the red. However, in that very same area in the green channel, my mask is jet black. There is no green in that area. And finally, in the blue, it is also jet black. This RGB readouts are simply readouts of these masks right here. Does that make sense? What's going on? That's what the Adobe brothers, that's what the Knoll brothers did. That was it. They're worth billions and billions and billions of dollars, and that's all they invented. They're every single thing that happens in Photoshop. I don't care what you do in Photoshop, all you're doing is changing these masks. That's all you're doing. So to prove it to you, let's look and see what happens. Let's add another layer to this guy, a blank layer over here on the side in the layers palette. And let's actually paint with red. So if you click on the color picker to bring up the color picker, type in a 255 in the red value and say okay. We've now got a red brush that we can paint with. Hit the B key to get that brush. In my case, I told you to use the pencil to do your notes on. You need to go back to the regular paint brush. Again, I'm going to go up. I can't see right now my, I can't see my application frame. So if you lose your application frame like this, because it's showing other windows, come up to the Photoshop menu, come down to Hide Others, and it'll get rid of those other guys. You can now see your application frame, and you can also see all your settings in here. I'm going to actually ask you to click on this drop-down menu to select a hard brush. And then again, I always tell you this, click outside somewhere near the Adobe, the name Adobe Photoshop to get rid of this drop-down menu without doing anything to your actual image. That'll get rid of the fly-down menu. Hover over your image like this. I'm gonna make my sub brush a little bit smaller by using the bracket key right next to my P key, and I'm gonna simply paint a red line across this. And what you'll notice has happened is this, that what that did, that stroke, it simply changed these three channels. It opened up the area in the red channel to white. It also added black to the green channel and black to the blue channel so that this ends up being a pure red. That's all it did. This stroke changed these three masks. That's all that happened. The top one that you see is strictly a preview. This top RGB guy is not a true channel. It shouldn't really even be there because you can see the damn preview big as life. It's called your image. These three things are the only thing that ever change, that ever get affected. So to prove that to you, let's invert this guy. So again, you've got this second layer, the layer number one is selected. If you hit Command I, it changes that color to cyan. Cyan is the opposite of red. It has just been inverted. Look at what has happened now. The red mask has now got that area is completely blacked out. There is no red in this anymore. However, I've got that white shape in the green and the blue channel. That is 100% combination of green and blue. What do you get when you combine green and blue? Cyan. This is how you create cyan, only using these three masks. Go up to the filter menu and come down to blur. And we're going to blur the shit out of this guy. So hit it with a blur of like 27. That's what I'm going to hit mine with. Now, you guys might have a hard time seeing your channels because they're so small. If you want to see them larger, like I've got them right here, click on this flyout menu right here on the channels palette, come down to panel options, and click on the large thumbnail and say okay. And now you'll get them bigger. And you will see what has happened now is that it wasn't some fucking magic that happened here in Photoshop land. It simply took these areas of these masks and it blurred them. And it blurred all three of them equal. If you turn the eyeball off on the side of the layer, you will see that that area has disappeared from these three masks. Everything, I don't care what it is you do in Photoshop, the only thing it does is change these three masks. Period. Never any different. Does this make sense? Okie dokie. One last thing is to prove that this thing is actually what I'm telling you that it actually is select, you can actually select channels. If you come over, you can select just the red channel or the green channel or the blue channel, and you can copy these things just like you do layers. So you can actually grab the blue channel and you could drag it down to make a copy of it, and you see it's called blue copy. But if you go up to the RGB guy and you grab him and you drag the RGB guy down, you'll see that you cannot make a copy of it. Why can't I make a copy of the RGB channel? Because it's not a real channel. You can only have black and white in channels. All the selections that we saved when we were saving those selections before were saved as they're not. It's not only black. They're grayscales. You can save. You can actually have a grayscale because the grayscale will allow you to have a partial selection. You can throw the blue copy away again. And finally, can somebody explain to me why the gradients look like the gradients actually look? The gradients in the channel. Why do they look this way? Exactly, because the gradient, again, if you hover your mouse over the gradient, anywhere in here, you'll see that the RGB values are all the same. So the RGBs, the area that I'm on right now is a very dark 16, 16, 16. But you'll actually see that that's what's happening here. That's what this mask is allowing to happen. This mask is allowing 16 red to come through. It's also allowing 16 green to come through and 16 blue to come through. By the time I crank all the way up here to the white, again, at this stage, it's not pure white now, but at this stage of the game, I'm letting it 252, 252, 252. That's why this mask is letting that in. The reason I have no color in these guys is because I've got equal amounts of red, green, and blue in all of those areas. Make sense? Okay, so you can close this guy up and get to the money. Yep, so there's a file you should have called Hair Fantasia. If you open this guy up. So this is the part I always get about when people want to come into Photoshop. How do you do this? How do you do this? How do you do this? Right? So it's select this guy. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to do this. So if I was going to build a selection, I want to change the background color that this girl is on. It's a sort of it's a very pale blue. That's what she's actually on. You can sort of tell it's not a pure white. If you hover your mouse over it, you'll actually see that there's a little, actually it's a little bit cyanic because you can see there's a slight deficiency in the red. If this was a red of 252 or 251 like these other two, it would be just a very light gray. But it's got a little bit of a cyanic cast to it because there's a little bit less red in it than there is the other two. But nonetheless, I want to change the color of the background. Or I want to take this girl and put her in a different place. I want to put, I don't know, I want to change it. Whatever. So the game, the issue here is how do you actually then, what we call in Photoshop, when you talk about doing this kind of work, it's called knocking them out. So the term knockout actually comes from, it's a film term that they use in masking in film terms, but you'll hear me use this term over and over and over again. When I say I want you to knock the girl out, it's not that I want you to hit her, it's that I want you to separate her from the background. So how would you guys go about doing this? And how would you select the background? So some people would do color range, right? Some people would try the quick selection tool. Some people would actually go in and, I don't know, there's 1,000 ways that you could try to actually do this. But what are we ultimately trying to build? What is ultimately do we need to separate her from the background? We need a mask. That's what we need, right? If I can build the perfect mask, I can separate the girl from the background. I can use the mask to get rid of this background and put another one in its place, right? I can isolate her from it if I can build the perfect mask, right? So I'm going to try that, right? Do I already have a mask, any masks built of this girl? Yeah. Where? Exactly. There's masks that have already been built, ones that have already started, that are in all likelihood better than anything you guys could come up with to start with. And so it's in the channels, and there's only 3. There's a red channel, a green, and a blue. If you click on the red channel, and where I'm clicking right now, I'm not clicking on the icon itself. I'm actually clicking right sort of next to the word red. You can see that this is what the mask is, the way this thing starts out. This is the beginning of a mask. This would be good for the hair, but it would not be really good for the skin tone at all. Why wouldn't it be good for the skin tone? because what I'm really looking to achieve in this is a complete difference of the background and the girl. Now, it doesn't matter to me whether I make the girl black and the background white or the background black and the girl white, because I can always invert those. It doesn't matter which of these I really go after. And I'll show you what that really means in just a second. I typically find it easier to work in the positive. So in the positive, I'm going to make this girl black. But the truth of it is, when I go to use the mask, she needs to be white. She needs to show. I need to hide the background, so the background actually needs to be black. But that's not the way I'm going to actually start off and work. I'm just going to invert it at the end. Does that make sense? You'll see. Okay, so I'm starting with the red channel, and what I'm really looking for is contrast. What I'm hoping to get is a real difference between the hair and the background. The stronger this difference exists, the better off the mask is, because ultimately in the end, that's what I'm going for. I want the girl to be black, the background to be white. Now, I'm probably going to have certain areas of transition in here. So for instance, if you look at a really fine hair up here, hair itself is actually not completely opaque. Hair has actually got some transparency to it. That's why when you get lit with backlight, you'll actually get that halo around it. There is a little bit of transparency in there. We need to maintain some of that. But we'll get to that in just a second. We'll talk about that as we get there. So what I'm typically looking for when I begin is, what do I need to achieve the most difficult part? Now, in the red channel, I've got good separation between the hair, but in the skin tone, I don't have such good separation there at all. So this is not the ideal mask for me to start with. However, it's a good one for the hair, and the hair is going to be more problematic for me to separate than the body is. But I'm going to check the green channel next. And when I click on the green channel, what you see happen is this. The hair actually gets lighter and the skin gets darker. So the green channel is a little bit better for me for the skin, but it's worse for the hair, and the hair is the bigger problem. So if I only had these two options to look at, I would stick with the red channel. Finally, I'm going to look at the blue channel and see what happens there. And again, I am actually seeing the blue channel get lighter. That's what I'm picking up here. Do you guys feel that? If you want to know for sure what happens or how that goes down here, you can actually measure it. You can put a color point. Where I'm really seeing the difference is in this part of the hair right up here. So I'm going to throw a color point right down on this. I'm actually going to come up to the eyedropper tool, down to the color sampler tool, and I'm going to drop something right down in here. Now you need to make sure that where you drop that point is not background. This is hair right here. That's all I'm looking at right here is hair. Right here. So that's where I'm going to drop this point. And you get a readout, and I'm getting 55, 55, 55, looking at the blue channel. When I click on the red channel, I'm getting 41, 41, 41. That is an indication that the red channel, this area, is a darker color than the blue was. Does that make sense? Are we good on that? All right. So I'm going to copy the the red channel. Simply drag the red channel. Again, I've got color samplers on here now, so I can't get to the bottom of my channels palette. So I'm simply clicking on the palette tab and dragging it up. I'm not too concerned with history right now. And I'm going to drag this down, and I'm going to simply grab the red channel and drag it down on the little dog-eared guy, and it makes a red copy. And I'm going to double click on that and rename it Knockout 1. And I'm going to say okay to that. And then I'm going to select it and look at it. So I know it is active because it is highlighted, and I'm only seeing this one color. I'm going to double click on the hand to kick back out. And now what I've got to do is, again, what I'm hopefully going for, the target that I'm going for here is to have a white background and have dark hair. So I'm not going to use the color sampler point that I'm actually using here. I'm going to get rid of that color sampler point, and we're going to go looking at this hair. So to get rid of that color sampler point, again, click on the color sampler flyout menu, hit clear all. We need to go investigate these edges. And I'm going to look in this area that's right over here. Look up on my screen. It's the area that's on the right side. I'm going to zoom in over here and take a look to see what's really going on over here. And you can see there's areas over here that clearly are transparent. Areas here where we've got loose hair that's happening right here. We've got background that's right next to it. I've got an area right here. If you look at where I'm pointing on my screen right here, this is an actual area of transparent hair. This actually should not go completely black. black in my mask. This should actually be letting something come through. But I can look at these areas around here, and I also want to avoid highlights. You see this area right here? This is a highlight on this girl's hair. What I'm looking to do is pick a point in this hair that I know should be completely black. I'm gonna avoid the highlights here. Where you pick these points ends up being critical. So I'm gonna avoid this area. This is too translucent down here. This is an area I don't wanna pick. I would avoid this. However, I'm gonna look at this curl right here, and you see this like really dark area that's right here. I'm looking at my readout and I'm getting a 46 here. I feel like that should be completely black in my mask. I'm even gonna look at this area right up in here. This is a 53. If I get this 53 up here to go black, that 41 that was down here will hit black before this guy does. Does that make sense? So this is part art in this, guys, picking these points. I can't guarantee this will always work, but it's going to give me a good place to try. So the area that I want you guys to pick, if you want to do the very same thing for me, is look for this area on this far edge right here. You'll see it's sort of like where all these strands of hair sort of like come together, and there's an area sort of right in the middle that I'm going to click a color sampler point, and it's giving me a reading now. I was reading 46, 46, 46, but all of a sudden I get this K reading. It's dropped that 1 point down, but I'm getting a K reading. What the fuck is that? What? Did you guys set your points down? Did you get a K reading? It should have added a color sampler point for you, and it's a K in percentages. What that K reading is giving you is an ink percentage. K is black ink. Because this is a black plate, this is actually a plate that can only handle grayscale. They give you these readouts in CMYK. There is no color in this, so you only get the K readout. You can change that. If you click on this number 1 point in your info palette, if you actually click on the eyedropper, you get a drop-down menu. Instead of doing actual color, you want to come down to RGB, because everything we do to this image is going to be based on RGB values. So I'm going to click on RGB color, and you'll see this now gives me a readout of my 46, 46, 46. Your reading may not be exactly that, but you should be damn close. Are you guys close to this? If you get lost in this, you need to stop me. You need to holler, okay? Yes.
So, you've got
It doesn't matter on the top one at all. It only matters on this guy at all. It's just got 1 point. Who else? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm using it roughly right.
Yeah, that's good enough. Okay, you're getting into 38. That's okay. Actually, you just put something down. See, they're off.
What rating is that?
Yeah.
What rating did you get? I got a 40. You're way off.
Exactly right. All right, everybody else is good, right? Okay, we need to set, that's our first point. We need to set a second point. The second point is going to be for the background, and you do not want to travel far away from their first point. You don't want to, yeah? Okay, guys, so we're in this area right now. We need to actually set a second point on this. And again, it's for the background. Like I said, you don't want to go far away from this, but you want to avoid this area right here. You don't want to sample something in here. There's too much hair that's actually happening here. But I'm going to go just out here to the side, and I'm going to click a second point out here. This also gives me another readout in K. It's my point number 2. I'm going to change this readout again using the little, I'm clicking on the eyedropper to get the drop-down menu, changing it to an RGB readout. And so what I've got now here in my mask that I'm working on so far is I've got an area that I don't want to be black that's reading in the 46s, and I've got another area in here that I want to be white and it's reading in the 248s. How can I actually make these things those tones? How do you change tonality in Photoshop? Say what? Don't curves change tone in Photoshop? Don't levels change tones in Photoshop? Right? Let's try levels. I'm going to run levels on this. Now, this is an important distinction. This is not an adjustment layer. You could come over here and do an adjustment layer and make your image darker or lighter, more contrasty. We're not working on layers over here. We're working on channels. The work that you do on channels is permanent. Although we're working on an alpha channel here, it's not going to affect my image. It's just going to affect my mask. I can throw this alpha channel away, this thing that I've named Knockout 1. So if I screw this up, if it doesn't work, I can either go back in history to undo it, or I can start the whole process all over again. So what I'm trying to say to you is there is no adjustment channel. There is nothing I can put on here that will temporarily do it that I can turn on and off like exists over in layers. This is a permanent move. To do it, you hit Command L. That brings up the levels dialog box. If you can't remember that, I'm going to hit cancel out of mine. You can simply go up to adjustment in the image mode, down to levels. You get to the same place. If you want to do this with curves, it's Command M. But I'm going to suggest, at least in the beginning, you do this with levels. It's one of the few times I use levels over curves. So Command L brings up the levels dialog box. We are going to be changing the levels of this knockout layer. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the black point. The black point is actually the little dark slider that's sitting on the left of the histogram right here. And this is the only thing I can warn you about doing this. You would typically say, well, Verser, your number 1 point is 46. If you simply type 46 in here, you will get to a black point. And even though that is exactly how it should work, that's not how it works. You have actually got to watch this visually, and you've got to watch the numbers. So I don't want you to watch the image at all. I want you to strictly watch the info palette, this info palette. Now, what you're also seeing in the info palette here is 2 sets of numbers. And the 2 sets of numbers now, because we brought up the levels dialog box, the 2 sets of numbers are going to show you the change. So the numbers that are on the left-hand side right here, these numbers that are here, let me do this on my screen so it'll be part of the video. The numbers that are right here on the left-hand side of this of using this level are the original numbers. The numbers on the right-hand side are going to be the new numbers once I change something here. The reason these guys are identical is because I haven't changed anything in my levels dialog box yet. So I'm going to click on the black point here. I am now watching my info palette, and I'm starting to drag my slider towards the right. When you get to around a 5 or a 4 or a 3, you need to stop. And you need to now go to your arrow keys, and you use the up and down arrow keys to do these steps one at a time until you hit 0. And you do not want to go one step further. You could continue to go further. Watch what happens to my mask as I continue. I'm going to still stay black here at this point, but as I crank this up, that is not the mask you want to build. But my points right here are still 0. So the reason I have you do it this way is it is the minimum amount of correction that you need to get that point to actually go black. So again, I'm getting to around 6. I go to the arrow keys. I hit the up arrow key once, I'm at 5. Again, I'm up at 3. One more time, I'm at 2. One more time, I'm at 1. One more time, I'm still at 1. One more time, and I hit 0. And nothing more. And now you will see exactly what I was talking about. I've actually taken an area that was at 46, 46, 46, and gotten it to go black. However, it's an input of 35, not 46. So I am not overdriving this mask any more than I should be. Does this make sense? Is this working for you guys? Do you have a 0, 0, 0 for the black point and the hair right now? Does anybody not? Okay, we need to do the same thing for the white point. We're going to actually grab the white point. I am looking at my RGB in my info palette. I'm going to start to drag it back till I get to like a 254 and stop. Go to your arrow keys and start hitting the down arrow key till you just get that. The up and down arrow keys change these numbers by single increments. That's why I'm using them. Every time you hit the down arrow key, it'll change it from 246 to 245, and then to 244, and then 243. It changes everything. Every hit of the arrow changes it by only an increment of 1. This is now a levels that is going to give me what I want in my mask. I've got a white background. I've got black hair here. I don't have all black hair. A lot of this hair has got highlights on it. That has not gone. I've also got transparency in here as well. Those have not gone, but I've gotten these two to be sort of where I actually want these guys to be. Before you say okay to this, go to your preview checkbox and turn this guy on and off. You also can use the keyboard shortcut that I was telling you. The command key plus the space bar plus the option key will give you the negative magnifying glass. We can zoom out now. If you only hold down the space bar, you actually get the hand, but there's nothing to move around because we're seeing this thing full frame. Use your preview on and off to make sure that we are doing what we want to do, that we're not overdriving this. This is actually looking pretty good to me. There's areas that I need to clean and fix up, but for the most part, this is beginning to actually work pretty well for me. I'm going to zoom back into this same area and check my edges. This is the most important part. You need your mask to have these areas of transparency. Like, look at my screen right here. These areas that I'm talking about right here. You do not want all of this to be jet black. It will make your mask look like you cut it out with an X-Acto knife. But what I do have that's happening in this mask is all of this sort of like fine hair detail, all of this sort of finery in here is happening really well. When I actually look in areas inside of here, this seems to be, it's a good first move for me. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. And this is the beginning of my mask. I'm going to double click on the hand again to kick back out to see how good this ultimately ends up being. And then I've actually got to do some hand work on this mask. So that's going to be the thing we're going to go after next. I'm going to actually start in this sort of same similar area that we were actually looking at. Now, I've got areas in here that I know are actually highlights on this girl's hair. If you want to see the girl in her complete RGB-ness all over again, come back over to your channels palette. You need to click on the RGB guy, and you'll see right up here in the top that what we have here, these are areas of highlights. This is not background. There is background in these areas right here. I don't want to paint these areas that are out, but these areas that here that are the highlights, I need those guys to be black in my mask as well. So I'm going to go after them. Clicking back on the knockout number 1 here, I can actually do some handwork on this. So I'm going to do brush work. I'm going to hit the B key to get the brush. I'm going to hit the D key to default my colors to black and white. I'm going to hit the X key to change my foreground color so that it is black. I'm now going to actually do the first real work we've done in this class with my tablet. I'm going to zoom in, and again, my keyboard shortcut for zooming in is the command and space bar. I'm going to click in, and I've got to take care of these areas in here that I know are highlights. In order to do that, I want to check my brush. You want to make sure that your brush is 100% hard brush. Because the problem with a soft brush is a soft brush will actually spray paint out into this background and destroy my mask. That's not what I want to do. I'm only going after areas here that I know I need to have to be solid black in this mask. So again, I've got a solid brush. There is no hardness at all. Using this drop-down menu, no, it's 100% hard brush. Clicking out here, 100% opacity, 100% flow, normal blending mode. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller by using the bracket keys, and I'm simply going after areas in here that I know are supposed to be jet black. I'm avoiding these areas as I start to get out to this other hair out here. I'm just going after this part that I know should be black. If you hold down the space bar, you temporarily get the hand and you can move around your image. And you're just looking to take out those highlights. When you get to this area on the right side over here, I don't know if this is background or highlight. You need to check it by going back to the RGB channel. If you click on this, you see this area is actually background. You want to leave this alone. If you paint this in, you start to take away the authenticity of your mask. You're making it fake. So that stays, it doesn't go away. This all goes away though, all of this stuff in here. I'm staying away from these areas that, again, I know should be, that I'm worried about here. It's just the highlight areas that I'm going after. I'm staying away from my edges altogether, and I keep doing this. You could actually even go after a good part of the girl that you know. Again, the girl has got to be clearly a part of all of this. So you could go after all of these areas in here. Stay away from your edges if you're doing this. You could also hit the L key to give you the lasso tool, and you can select large areas that you know should be black, and then fill them with black. The keyboard shortcut for filling with the foreground color is Option Delete. If you want to fill with background color, it is Command Delete. But I want to do Option Delete to fill that. Command D to deselect. So that's all fine and well, but I'm talking about these areas here that I've actually got to go after that are partially dark, partially light. It's this kind of stuff in here that I don't want to screw up too much, that I don't want to, I'm worried about this. To try to go in and paint this stuff is virtually impossible to do with a normal brush. However, your brushes have blending modes. So the B key is the key I'm selecting again. To see what this really does, if you zoom out here, let's kick back out. Let's zoom out of our image a little bit. I want you to come on to look at an area over here that actually is essentially white. I've got the brush key is selected. I've got black as my foreground color. And if I come over in this area that's this white area of my background over here and I click and I paint, it paints black ink onto it. And that destroys my mask. That's not what I want to do. Command Z to undo that. However, if you change the blending mode of your brush from normal to overlay, what ends up happening now when you go to paint with black is it looks at the image, the area that you're actually trying to paint on. Overlay is a contrast brush. It's not one of the normal blending modes brushes. So what's going to happen here, if you try to paint with black on a white area, you will see nothing actually happens. It will not let you paint black on a black area. However, if you come into this area of this girl's hair, like right down here in this area, this dark area, when you use an overlay brush, it will let you paint with with black. However, if you've done that, hit Command Z to undo that. You also want to do this with a soft brush. We are now going to let the brush, the blending mode, keep us from painting on areas of background that should be white. However, we want to feather this stuff in so that we maintain these softer transition areas. So I'm going to go to a completely soft brush. Blending mode is set to overlay. Black is my foreground color. And now I can come over to these areas and go after these image areas that I feel like should actually go back. And I can do it with a little bit more abandon than I could actually do it earlier. I'm going to stay away from this area that's right on the very edges of this. I'm going to avoid that altogether. I'm not touching those guys. I'm just going after these other areas where I know this actually, like this area, I'm leaving this guy alone. This is transparent and should remain that way. This, however, right here is highlight. So a little bit smaller brush. I'm going to take care of that. I'm going to go after some of this guy as well. This as well. I'm leaving those edges out there. Maybe hit that guy. This stuff is going to stay exactly where it is. I'm leaving all of that where it is. I'm coming into this area that's down here by her neck and this. Now, a perfect example of where this may help us out, and I'm not sure it is going to help us out here, is going to be this girl's shoulder. So if you make a slightly larger brush right here, I'm going to try to hit this girl's shoulder and see if this brush will actually work. So again, black is my foreground color, overlay is my blending mode for the brush, 100% opacity, 100% flow. And when you click and you drag across, it respects. It actually found that girl's edge, but it didn't make this thing black. However, the overlay brush is cumulative. If you hit this a second time, you will actually get this edge. So I'm going to continue to go down. There's going to be other ways that we learn later about how to get this, how to finesse this edge a little bit better. But for the time being, this will actually give you a pretty good one here. So again, I'm just doing repeated strokes. I'm trying to keep the brush as close to it as I can. I'm not going to go after this part of the jewelry. Maybe I'll do a little bit of the jewelry. I can actually probably hit the neck as well. This stuff that's up here, there's a little bit of hair here that I want to keep, is this sort of softness. But the rest of this ear over here, I don't need to keep this way. So I'm going to change my overlay brush back to a normal brush. I'm going to change the edge of my brush back to a 100% hard brush. I'm going to click out of here up on the handle to get the flyout menu to go away. And then I'm going to simply go after this area that's already got a border on it. I don't need to worry about establishing that edge. That part is actually working for me. However, there's an area here of this strap that is not working for me. We're going to do a quick cheat here today because there's other ways that we will go after this in a later class. But the quick cheat for this today is to not try to paint this line, but to what we call nip it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to only use the very edge of my brush. Again, you have to do this with a hard brush. And I'm simply going to click here to drop a point. And then I'm going to move slightly over and do it again and again and again and again. I'm simply tapping my brush down to establish that edge. I'm going to do the very same thing the little glittery box up at the top. And I'm going to do the same thing for the jewelry on this side. Once that's happened, you don't need to worry about this side anymore. On the other side here, I've got a huge problem with this face. I can't even see where the edge of this face is supposed to be. I can see where it's meeting the hair, this area that's actually up in here. I can see this, and I can actually go ahead and paint that out. But this edge is really difficult for me to see. If you turn the eyeball on, now you need to look up at my screen to see what I'm doing here. I'm going to turn the eyeball on of my RGB channel. I'm not going to pick the channel. If you pick the channel, you see the whole RGB guy. You don't see anything. This is not what we're trying to work on. I'm going to select my knockout layer again. You get this black thing. However, if you turn the eyeball on, what you'll end up is seeing is a red overlay on your image. The red overlay is the knockout channel that we are actually working on. The full color we're actually being able to see. What the red overlay is, though, is showing me where my mask actually is. And now I can actually spot this edge. Again, this is not the way you are going to learn. In 2 weeks from now, we are going to do a completely different thing to pick up this edge right now. But for the time being right now, I want you guys to use this method, and it's just going to be the easiest thing to use. So again, I'm working on the knockout layer. It is the active layer. You can tell it is active because it is highlighted. Its eyeball is on well. I've got the RGB channel on, only visible. I'm not painting on any of these layers. I'm only working on the knockout. That's why you see this red overlay. The red overlay is actually my mask. And you can see, if you click and you start to paint on this, I'm extending the red. What I need you to do is that same nipping trick to actually get the edge of this girl's cheek. And this may not be perfect, but it will be close enough. Finally, I've got that part here, so I feel like I've got a reasonably good edge here. I'm going to then turn off the eyeball on the RGB guy. I'm still working on my knockout layer. I need to finish up this part of the mask down here. So again, my B key to get a brush, back to overlay on my brush. In this case, make sure that it is a soft overlay brush. Click out to up here to get the flyout menu to go back away. And then again, I'm going to try to go after the same where the skin is meeting the background here. These are repeated brush strokes that I'm doing. I'm trying to help Photoshop as much as I can. I'm trying not to go to make Photoshop work any harder. There are people who will do this. There are people who actually just go over the whole thing like this in the white areas and the black areas both. I do not suggest doing that. I suggest don't make Photoshop work any harder than it actually has to work. I've still got a problem in here. I'm going to try the overlay brush on this. You'll see it's contaminated my background a little bit here. I'm going to keep going here. You can hit the X key to change your foreground color to white. The overlay brush works in white as well, and you can see I've got contamination right here at the top. My mask is being sprayed out into the background. You can actually clean that up by painting with a white overlay brush on top of it. So we can finish cleaning out the rest of our background layer like this. I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm going to go hit the X key again to go back to my overlay brush to finish cleaning up some of the areas in here of this mask that I know should be dark. Yep. Yes, because again, I'm going back to try to paint this line right here. But you're painting black, so we can see something black. Hit it again. Lift your mouse up, lift your paintbrush up, hit it again. Perfect. Great. Save this file to your desktop right now. Click Photoshop and start that. All right, so just a couple of little other touches around here. A little something in there. Finish this guy up in here. A little edge work in there. A little edge work in here. double click on the hand and kick back out. It looks to me like we've got the beginnings of a reasonable mask here. I've got some areas right here in the middle that I know should be black. So now I can actually hit my brush to get the B key. I change this from overlay up to normal, change my edge to a completely hard edge brush. Come in here. There's areas that I know in here clearly should be dark. All of this stuff down here in the lower part of her body should actually be dark. But again, I'm doing this with a hard edge brush, so I don't worry about spraying into my background. You can, again, also grab the L key to get the lasso tool and then just select around this area right now and fill this with black. Command D to deselect. Save your file. Yes. Still one. Now you can get really close. Okay, so does everybody have a reasonably good mask going that you feel like? Close enough, close enough, close enough. So let's see how it goes. So I'm going to go back into, again, I would save this file right now, although this is not part of your homework file. I know, right? Don't worry, we are going to get to your homework file. We're going to hopefully get to your homework file right now. So I want to use this guy. I want to see if this guy actually works. So I'm going to go up to the very top of my RGB channels. I'm making the RGB channels active again. These are now active. I'm actually going to make a copy of my background layer. I'm going to click on the first background layer, the original part of it, and I'm going to put a blank layer in between the two. And I'm actually going to fill the blank layer with a color. I'm going to pick a light blue, which is cheating a little bit, and I'll show you why I mean that in just a second. But the blue that I'm going to actually put in here will be, I'm going to put in a 0 red, and let's put in a 128 blue. No, let's put in a much lighter blue than that. Let's go to, I'll simply drag this up. I'm going to actually put a cyan in there. That's what we'll do. Let's just put a pure cyan in there. There you go. I'm going to put in a solid blue, 255 blue, solid green, 255 green. I'm going to say, okay, that's now going to be my foreground color. Again, I've got a blank layer that's sitting between these two objects. To fill this blank layer, it is the active layer. You can tell it is because it's highlighted. It's the active layer. To fill it, you hold down the Option and hit the Delete key. It's going to fill this guy with turquoise. So basically, this is how your file should look. You've got a background company sitting here. You've got a solid blue layer, a cyan layer that's sitting above it, and then this guy that's up on top. And your image doesn't look any different because we haven't used this mask yet. In order to use the mask, we need to load it. Now, you could load this mask by coming up to this Select menu, down to Load Selection, and you'll see Knockout exists right here. Yes? You're good so far, you're good so far, you're good so far. You can do it that way, or the easier way, easier way, easier way, easier way. You're going to shift, you're going to shift. Click on this layer is active. This is your foreground color. Hold on the Option key and hit Delete. It fills with your foreground color. Hold down the Command key. Hit Delete. Fills with your background color. Hold down the Option key. Delete foreground color. Okay. So you could go up to load this, the mask. You could go up to the, I'm going to cancel out to show you again, up to the Select menu down to Load Selection. And in your drop-down menu, you'll have Knockout 1. Any channel that you've saved as a selection will exist down here. We've actually made this channel from a copy of the blue or the copy of the red channel. So I'm going to say, okay, I could do it that way. I'm going to cancel out of this, though. Instead, I'm simply going to hover over the Knockout channel. Do not select the channel. I see people do this all the time. People come over here and they click on it, and then you've got the mask. And that's not what you need. So I'm going to stay up in the RGB. Hover over this thing, hold down the Command key, and click, and it will load this as a selection. Come over to your background copy, click on the very top one to make it active, and then click on Add Mask. And again, this is exactly what I told you. Typical of me, I'm doing art posters. This is my Avedon Beatles poster, right? It's the exact opposite of what I wanted. It's the girl in this mask is black and the background is white. It's showing the background and not the girl. You simply need to select a mask. You can tell the mask is active because it's got the little brackets around it. Hit Command-I to invert it, and you've got this girl knocked out on a cyan background. Now, I'm thinking right about now, you people should be going, fucking A, yes. I wanted to learn how to select hair, and I just did. Look at your work. I want everybody in this room to look at what you just did. Look at this. This is not worth $35 an hour. This is worth $150 an hour. Damn right it is. Look at the quality of these masks. If we didn't get lost in some of this, we would be doing okay here. But look at this. Look at that. Are you kidding me? How sick is that? When you get good at this, which you're going to in this class by doing this over and over and over again, do you know how long it takes me to knock out this girl? 5 minutes. Do you know how much I could bill for doing it? Oh my God, look at this girl's hair. You expect me to knock that thing out? This is going to take me hours. I'm thinking $500 to get the girl knocked out and probably another $1,000 to do anything else you really want me to do on this. And secretly, I'm laughing the whole time knowing it's going to take me 5 minutes to knock this girl out. And sure, 5 minutes to knock her out at $500 an hour? Let's see. Do the math. That would be 12 times 500. That would be, you would be doing the work at the equivalent of basically $6,000 an hour. I can take, that would work for that. There's a lot of things I would do for $6,000 an hour, and they don't have anything to do with Photoshop. Anyway, okay, are there questions about this? Now, is this a perfect world? No, this is not a perfect world. If you then hit the D key to get your colors to default to the background foreground color, click on that cyan layer again. Well, click on the cyan layer first, then hit the D key. You'll get your foreground colors to be black and white. Hold down the Option key and give yourself a black background. Do you have a perfect mask? No, you do not have a perfect mask. The issue that you're actually seeing right now, the thing that what we call this, typically call this is called spill. Usually you get spill in two different varieties. You get color spill, which is the most obvious one, but you also get tonal spill, which is what we're actually getting here. There are ways that we could actually change this, but the truth of the matter is to actually go in and fix this is a whole nother conversation. But I just wanted you to know that there's so much at this stage of the game that will work on this to the degree that we've built this mask. Again, when you start getting into situations where your lighting is actually polar opposite, you've got somebody on a white background and you go to make it a black background, you're going to run into problems like this. This is not a perfect world. Command-Z to undo that. But check this out. Click on your foreground color picker and let's just, we'll simply go, let's go back to our green. So again, that was a 255, it was a 255 blue and a 255 green. And then I'm going to say just select the hue slider. Now the hue slider, we have already got all pure saturated colors in here, and select and just drag it down and give yourself a neon green to put on there and say okay to that. Option delete. It works with green pretty well as well. Hit the foreground color again, open it up. Let's go to a yellow. Sure, that's a good yellow. We'll say okay to that. Command, again, option delete to change this to yellow. All of these colors up in the lighter palettes are working flawlessly with this guy. Are there problems that we've got? Yes, I'm spotting a problem right here. I can see this area right here that I think is still a problem. I can still work on my mask. If you hold down your option key and click on the mask, you'll see it. It's this area right here. And the problem that I've got is that this area is not dark enough. It's showing, it's letting my original background actually show through here. So I need to actually work on this. So while you are actually in your mask, like we are right now, I've clicked on this layer. I'm going to click on the mask itself to make it active. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to change the blending mode of my brush to overlay. I'm going to then change this to a soft brush, but I'm also going to drop the opacity of this. This is not going to be an all or nothing thing. So I'm going to drop my opacity down to like a 25, 30%, something like that. I'm down in this area. I don't really know whether I need to be painting this thing with white or black. I got lost in the whole confusion of all of this, but I'm going to find out right now. White is my foreground color. I am working on my mask. I've got a soft brush. I've got my blending mode set to overlay, my opacity at a smaller percent, not 100%. And I'm simply going to come in here and start hitting this. And I realize it is the wrong foreground color. It should have been black. So I'm going to go back in history to undo those brush strokes. I'm going to hit the D key to default my colors to black and white. Black is now my foreground color. Again, I'm going to reselect my mask because going back in history changed what was active here. So my mask is selected. I'm going to hit the X key to make black my foreground color, and then I'm going to start going over this again. And you can see I'm starting to suck out that black, that white background. It's not showing. I get frustrated because this is not happening fast enough. So I'm going to up my opacity of my brush to like 60%. That hits it way too hard. Look at that. It totally posterized that whole thing. It just destroyed that whole guy. So I can't go that hard at it. So I'm going to simply go back in time and feel like this is about as good a job as I'm going to get on this guy. That's actually been hit too strong again. But I just wanted to point out that you can continue to refine your masks even after they've been applied, that it's not the end of the world. So again, I'm back to sort of where I think it should be. I'll drop this opacity back and do this a little bit slower. And that's about going to be the best of it. Are there questions about this? Alrighty then, you can close this guy up. We are going to start your homework. You are going to have to turn this in. So you want to save this file, anything that we can get done on this. So the homework file, if you can find it, is this thing called Sunny. And if you open this image up, you'll see it's a picture. And again, the copyrights for all of this stuff are in the title. So this is actually a working file. It was pulled from a Deke McClellan lecture on lynda.com. So again, the whole thing about copyright, we are actually, I am a huge believer in observing copyright. Copyright pretty much goes out the window in learning institutions. It pretty much, for the most part, you cannot invoke a copyright protection on imagery that's being used for educational purposes. And this is something that comes down because of a whole bunch of librarians. But at any rate, what you're going to do on this image, so anyway, what I'm just trying to say is that we are well entitled to use this image and to work on this image. So what you're going to do for this image, what we need to do, what we're going to try to do for this image is separate 4 things in this image. I want you to actually knock out the girl, but basically what that means is that you need to separate the blue background. I also then want you to separate the sweater from everything else. I also want you to separate the skin tone from everything else. And finally, if you've separated all of those things, you should have the hair should be separate as well. So those are the 4 things that we're going to try to build. We are going to try to build a series of channels that will allow us to mask out the background and change it. It'll allow us to mask out the sweater and change it. Allow us to mask out the skin and change it. And finally, to isolate the hair and change it as well. Does that make sense? That's what the assignment's going to be. So we are going to start with this process. And you need to read. The way the assignment reads is that we're actually going to build a separate layer that isolates every single one of those areas. So you'll have a regular sunny area that's untouched completely. You always need to keep a virgin. Then we're going to have a layer that is just for the background, a layer just for the hair, just for the skin, and just for the sweater. Does that make sense? I'm going to warn you right now, do not ever apply your masks. I have people do this all the time, especially with this assignment when they first start out. They're going to build this beautiful selection. They're going to copy Sunny's layer. They're going to put the mask on, and then they apply the mask. There is nothing that will piss me off more if you do that. Why? Why would you care if I applied the mask? Has anybody still got their girl with the hair open? Not that it matters. If you apply a mask, you basically use that mask, you destroy the pixels that are underneath it, you get rid of it, and you can't refine it ever again. The mask erases all of that area, right? If you don't know what I mean by apply the mask, this is what I mean by apply the mask. Go ahead and just make a quick copy of Sunny. Oops. Simply drag her down, make a copy of it. And then we're going to put a layer mask on here. So I'm going to just click to put a layer mask on there. Hit the B key, which will give you the brush tool. Make it a relatively large brush. Make sure that the opacity is back up to 100%. Make sure that its blending mode is normal. I don't care whether it's a hard or soft brush. Hit the D key to get your foreground colors to default to black and white. Hit the X key to get black as your foreground color. Make sure that you've got the brackets around the mask. That's what actually is what will hide it. I'm going to turn off the eyeball on the Sunny underneath so that you can see what this mask is actually going to do. And then I'm simply going to paint a line through Sunny right now. So this is masking out this area and letting this white background show through. If you then take this mask and drag it down and it says, do you want to apply this before removing it? And you say, yes, it has erased those pixels of Sunny. Those pixels are gone now. The damage has been done. I can't go back and refine that mask. I can't change the edge of this mask. I can't do anything to this thing. It's just erased those pixels and that's it. That is idiocy. Why would anybody bother to do that? If you hit Command Z to undo that, you still have the exact same effect, but now I can actually go in and modify this mask. I can turn it off if I want to. Again, hold down the Shift key and click on the mask. I can turn it off. I haven't destroyed the image at all. I can turn it back on. I can actually add the brush key. I can add another layer on my mask. I can do more. I can hit the X key to paint with white. I can bring these areas back. I can still work with this image as long as I haven't applied the mask. The minute I apply it, it damages this file. I don't have the mask anymore to even be able to work on. It's just lunacy. There is one exception to applying masks, and when we get to it, I'll point that out to you. But I am telling you right now, don't apply your masks. Okay. I'm going to get rid of all of this. I'm going to get rid of the layer. I'm going to turn on Sunny. So we need to knock Sunny out. First thing I'm going to go after is the background. What do I do? What's my first step? I'm going to look at my channels and see which is the best for the blue background. Isn't that what you guys would do? Okay, so in here quick, I'm looking at the red channel. The red channel gives me reasonably, what I'm really worried about is the hair. Again, the shoulder here, I'm not so concerned about, but the hair part, this is going to be the real challenge. So I'm looking for the contrast between this blue background and this hair. So I'm looking at the red channel, not so good. Some difference in the two, but not great. I'm looking at the green channel. Well, the green channel is actually better. I've got a lighter background, darker hair. And then finally, I'm looking at the blue channel. And the blue channel, in my opinion, is clearly the best one. Don't you guys agree? It's the most contrasty of them. So I'm going to copy the blue channel. The blue channel gets drugged down on this little dog-eared guy. It's made a copy of the blue channel. Now I'm going to do the same thing we did before. Or I'm going to ask you guys, what is my next move? Actually, name it. You're absolutely right. Name this guy, and I'm actually going to call it, don't call it background. And the reason I say don't call it background is because they can get really confusing with this word right here, this background guy right here. So what I'm going to do instead is let's call this blue background. Just so that we're making a distinction between the two. What's my next move? Exactly. So I'm going to zoom into this area of her hair up here. This, again, is the edge. When you're worried, when you saw the last time when we were doing this, I'm not worried about separating her skin from this background right now. I'm worried about this edge right here. I'm worried about this area right here. This area of her hair in here, I can paint that in with a brush. It's no problem. It's this area in here that I'm the most nervous about. So I'm going to zoom into this one big curl right here, and we need to talk about this one big curl. So if you see areas in this curve, like look at the bottom of this curl right here. Let me go to something that maybe gives you a little bit better. This guy right here, this area right in here, this is actually an area that should have some transparency in here. There should be some of the background, whatever the background color is, should be coming through here. However, this area that's right up in here, look up at my screen again if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm pretty well convinced that this should actually be black and opaque. This area should be black and opaque. Maybe even this area right here. This area is an unknown to me. I'm really nervous about that. So I'm looking at this area right here. Now, I could pick a black color like that's right in here. I'm hovering over this. This is a 10-10-10. The problem is if I get this thing to go to black, these lighter grays in here will not actually drop down to black. However, the reverse also holds true. If I get these lighter areas, like this area I'm hovering over right here, it's reading 70s and the high 70s, low 80s. If I get the high 70s and low 80s to black, the area that's right over here that's already at 10 will already be at black. Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to do is pick an area that's not too aggressive, because if you get too aggressive with the thing that you want to go black, your mask will be too aggressive. You'll end up with you will lose all the fine, subtle detail in the hair. It'll just go too far. So for my money, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually pick this spot that's right up in here. It happens to be somewhere near the 40s and the 50s. This is pure coincidence. This is not, the last one that we did was very close to this same tone. I actually might even try this guy down here. This is closer into the 70s. Or maybe I'm going to pick something that's sort of in the middle. I'm going to pick this spot right in here. It's sort of in the high 50s. So again, I'm going to do the same trick. I'm going to do the color sampler point to go ahead and drop a color sampler point down here. I'm hovering right in this part of the curl right in here. And I'm sort of in the high 50s, and I'm going to drop a point right there. And it ended up giving me a K of 85%. I'm going to click on that color drop down and give myself an RGB readout. And it's in the mid 50s. That's where I landed on this point. And then I'm simply going to click on an area right out here in the background to give myself a background color, a background tone. And then I'm going to click again, click on the drop down menu, come down to give myself an RGB readout, and I'm getting 215. So those are the two values that I'm actually going to go after. You guys should be somewhat close to this. Is everybody up to speed with me? We good on this? What's my next move? Levels, Command L brings up the levels dialog box. I'm going to go after the black point first. I'm going to click and start dragging it to the right. I'm not watching my image. I'm watching my info palette readout. And what I'm trying to do is get around into the low. Well, I got to 3, and then I stopped with the dragging. I'm going to go then to my arrow keys. I hit the arrow key up twice, then it gets me to 1. One more time, didn't change. One more time, it gets me to 0, which gives me an input of 47. You should be somewhere close to this. Your numbers don't need to be exactly the same as mine, but they should be relatively close. Then I'm going to go after my highlight point. I'm going to click on it, start to drag it back. I'm watching my highlight slider only. I get to 252. I stop dragging the highlight slider, and then I go to my arrow keys, and I go to tap once, down, whatever. I get to 255. I'm feeling pretty good about this, but again, before I hit OK on this, I use my preview to check the quality of this. Do I feel like this is doing what I'm hoping I should get out of this mask? I feel like I'm still keeping a sort of a fineness in all of this hair. That part's actually remaining. I'm feeling good about that. It's not getting too chunky like this. It's not blowing out the hair, which is what that move will actually do there by overdriving the whites. It's also not getting too aggressive like this, where look at the edge quality right here. This is an ugly ass mask. This is not the mask you want. If you get this, or if you send me this, I'm not going to be happy. So again, I'm going to drag this back and start over to just looking at my points. And I'm going to go through it again to get as non-aggressive as I can possibly be, yet still do the work that I need it to do. So again, I'm back to 245, go after my arrow keys. Boom. One thing to check, a lot of times when you change, you set your black point, you get to 0, you change your white point, it will actually affect your black point, and sometimes your black point will creep back up again. So you need to recheck the black point to make sure that this thing stayed at 0, and it did stay at 0. Then lastly, before I hit OK, I'm going to hold down the spacebar command and the option key to zoom back at. And I want to just look around my image. I want to just, again, using this preview on and off, is this doing what I'm hoping it should do? And I'm feeling, yeah, this is seeming a pretty good beginning on this. Again, I'm losing this whole shoulder up here. That guy's not up here. I'll worry about that in another day. But I'm feeling good about the whole hair quality, that whole hair issue. Feeling pretty good about that. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. So, good beginning. I've still got a lot of work to do. I can actually go after this. My blue background is selected right now. I have absolutely no hair background in this part. This part of her hair is all highlights. This part over here, a lot of this is highlights. I'm going to avoid this edge, but I can go after, I can do a lot of this work really quickly with a brush. So I'm going to hit the B key. I'm going to make sure that my blending mode is normal, 100% opacity, 100% flow. I am going to make this a completely hard brush because, again, you do not want to overspray. And this is what I mean by overspray. I'm going to zoom into this area right down here. I'm going to go after this area right down here. Now, with a hard brush, I can come in like this. I can come in like this, and I don't worry about overspraying to the background. I'm going to undo that really quick. With a soft brush, this very same stroke will do this. When I do that, you already, I don't know if you could see that on the screen up here, I have already blown contamination, very light contamination, into this white background, which is a nightmare. You do not want to do that. Command Z to undo that. Again, this initial work you would do with a hard brush only. Get rid of that guy coming out. And again, I can go after, I avoid the edges altogether, but you can go after big chunks of this image right now. You can do stuff like this and really go after big parts that you know are going to have to be black. So all of this is going to black. Watch out over here. You don't want to get too aggressive about this, but I know all of this stuff is going to be black in here, and I can do that quick because it's really satisfying. I'm going to then zoom into this area right here, the lower part right here. Again, I'm worried about protecting this, so I am going to go to an overlay brush on this guy. I am going to make this a softer brush. I'm going to avoid the hair down here because I'm feeling good about what's happening down here, but I am going to hit that part right there like that, and that takes care of that pretty well. I'm also a little bit nervous about this, but again, my overlay brush now is set to a really soft brush. I'm going to actually crank it up to a sort of a mid-hardness. I want more of an edge down here, but I'm hoping that overlay will protect this white background. So again, I'm going to click outside of that. I'm going to probably make it a little bit smaller brush like this, and then I'm going to simply go after this guy. And indeed, that actually did a pretty good job. It should also work on her skin tone and her neck. That part worked there as well. I'm going to go check the other edges around here. I'm actually going to zip out. I'm going to zoom back out. I need everybody to do this. Zoom all the way back out so you can see this image. If you take any tool, it doesn't matter what tool, even the Move tool will actually give you this. But I need to get my readouts again. So I'm going to actually, I'm looking at my info palette. If you just start to hover over stuff around here, you can do it with the brush key. So the B key will actually do this. You'll see that we actually have tone up in here. Look in this top right-hand corner. I've actually got tone up there. This is reading 249, 249, 249. That is not white. This is not a complete white up here. So I've got to go up here and try to fix this guy. So I'm zooming into this area up in here. As you start, I'm not painting now. I'm just hovering over this to try to get a sense of my readouts. You can see that I've got background here that's reading really close to this. I'm reading around the 250s and around that kind of stuff. I need to protect this hair. I'm never going to get this perfect. I'm never going to get this background completely cleaned out. But I can get close to this. To get close to this, what I want you to do is this. You are going to stick with an overlay brush. We are going to do it at about a 50% hardness. This is a somewhat soft brush that I'm actually going to do it. However, I am going to keep the opacity at 100%, and then I'm simply going to come up into here to paint this area up in here. But I run into a problem. When I try to get to this area, I'm trying to paint in this area. You can see where I'm talking about right here. I'm trying to paint in this area up in here. What happens is when my brush goes outside of my canvas, it turns back into the mouse again. That's not helping me. I need to get what they call the pasteboard. To get to the pasteboard in Photoshop, you hit the F key once. The F key will take you to this thing. If you actually zoom all the way back out, you'll see what it is. Your image is now on this gray background. This is actually called the pasteboard. And the pasteboard allows you to have tools outside of your image. So now you can see, even if you go to a really big brush, you can actually start to paint outside this image. You could use the soft edge of a very large brush to try to do your work in this area. But because you're on the pasteboard, you still have the paintbrush. You don't lose it as you start to move outside. So with that said, I'm going to move back in. Again, I'm using the command tools, command and spacebar to give me the zoom key to zoom in, adding the option key to zoom out, the spacebar by itself to use the hand to move myself around to work in this area right here. I am going to make my brush a little bit smaller. Again, overlay brush, 50% hardness on this brush, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and I'm simply going to nip at this area and realize I'm painting with the wrong color. I'm painting with black. That's why I'm getting those tones up in here that I was worried about are actually going to black. So to get rid of those, I'm going to start going back in history, hit the X key to get white. And now what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to drop my cursor down here. I'm going to click and draw away from this. Instead of drawing into my image, I'm into this danger area, I'm going to draw out. I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'm simply clicking and pulling out like this to try not to pervert this edge. But you'll now see that this edge here, pretty far out, is actually gone to 255. This area out here still is not at 255. Or actually, it may be. It's looking like it actually is. But anyway, I'm going to finally just clean this area up around here. So that's how I take care of this edge here. I'm going to do the opposite for this area of her hair in here. I'm going to zoom into this area right in here. Now this, again, I'm feeling like this area that I need to worry about protecting. I'm going to hit the X key to get to black to be my overlay brush, and I'm going to simply click in these areas and pull in this direction. I'm trying to avoid this doing too much damage in this edge in here. But again, I'm protecting what I consider to be that edge. I'm going to go to a smaller brush. And again, I'm simply pulling this stuff out. I'm avoiding these edges right here. All of this stuff I know needs to be up, undo. This area that I just had right down here, I think this is background right down here. To check to make sure, you need to go back to your channels palette, click on the eyeball, and you can see this area is background right down here. So is this area down here. All of this you need to avoid with this brush. I'm going to turn that guy off again. This stays protected. However, the skin in her hands doesn't stay protected. So again, to a little bit smaller brush, and I'm simply going to continue to hit these to try to develop that edge. I'm not worried about this part of her skin, of her face right there. I'm not really worried about that. I'm going to go after the bottom part of her finger like that. I'm just repeatedly hitting this with my overlay brush set to black. I'm not really even worried about the middle parts right here. I'm a little nervous about this guy right here. That's a thumbnail, actually. Think right there, and based on what I think it is, I'm going to go back to a hard brush to actually nip away at that thumbnail right there to get that. And again, I'm not really concerned about the hardness of my brush here. This area is actually pretty easy to actually hit these guys. Once you've got an area where your edges, like if you look at your hand where the edges are actually done, again, I don't have the very tip of that fingernail. I'm going to make this a really small brush and simply nip at this. Again, we will look at better ways to do this work next week, I think. But this area that's in the middle now is strictly going to black. I don't need to worry about it. I can go back to normal and simply paint all this in. This is all I know. All of this area needs to be a part of this black mask. Does this make sense what we're doing right here? Are you guys good on this so far? Okay, the one problem I've really got here, though, is this shoulder. So if you've done this, save your work. So far, this is going to be your homework. I can finish this edge over here really quick with my brush. I'm going to go to a little bit larger brush because I've already established this edge with my overlay over here, normal brush here, and I'm going to simply finish painting all of this in. This is actually all gone to black. That all needs to go to black. I would finish working on this, but the one area that we don't have is this shoulder. This is a problem area for me. How do I get this shoulder? It's the last thing we'll do. We got 10 minutes to do it. How do I get the shoulder? Levels to what? There's no information there. I don't even see the line anymore. All right, I'm not going to let you guys guess anymore. I'm simply going to tell you. We are going to do the exact same. What we're trying to do right now is to build a mask to isolate the girl from the background. Why am I limited to doing that once? I'm not limited to doing that once. I can do this 1,000 times. I want something that will simply give me the edge of her shoulder. So I'm going to go right back into looking at my channels, and I'm looking at the red channel. I have reasonably good separation between this background and her shoulder. I'm going to look at the green. That's an awful separation between those two. I'm looking at the blue. It's arguably the worst of them all. My red channel actually gives me this separation line, and it does it pretty well. So copy the red channel. We are going to rename the red channel, and we're going to call it Temp Shoulder. I'm going to do exactly what we've done before. I'm zooming into this edge right here. I don't care about the rest of the image. All I care about is building this edge. I'm going to go up to my color sampler tool. I'm going to grab the color sampler tool. I'm going to try to find a spot on here that I know needs to actually be separate from the background. And I'm going to simply click on a point that's right here, right next to this girl's, right now, it's kind of near her hand, and then set another point that's out here in the background. You have two more points now. This point number 3, which is the sweater, and point number 4, which is the background. Change these readouts to RGB. Change the other one to RGB. In this case, I now need to put levels on this. I'm actually going to try to get the sweater to go to white and the background to black. Command L brings up your levels dialog box. I'm going to grab the black slider first and start to drag it forward. Now remember, I want the background to be going black. That's my point number 4. It was this 151. I'm going to continue to drag up until it gets close to 0. And I'm going to get to 4. I'm going to go to my arrow keys. If you use the wrong arrow keys, you go in the wrong direction. I got to 0 right there. I'm going to go back to my white slider. I'm now looking at my point number 3, the white sweater. I'm going to start to drag it back. I get to 253, and then I went to 255. I went too far with this slider, so I'm backing off till I get to 248 so that I can use the arrow keys to do the minimal amount that I need to get there. And then before you say, okay, look at this edge. This edge is actually what you want because that is a fuzzy sweater. You have background coming through. This edge should not look like you've cut this thing out with an X-Acto knife. The edge should actually look pretty much just like what we're seeing right here. You might go in and do a little bit of overlay work, but I'm going to guess for the most part, this edge is damn good. Look at this. This is all the feathery part of the sweater. If you turn on the preview and off, you can see that indeed, yes, that actually should be, that's sweater in there. It should be this. This is actually an excellent part of this. So I'm going to say okay to this. Yes. Well, again, you're trying to get to white. So in this case, it's 244. So your white point, you're close, but now you need to select it. Now go to your arrow keys. Keep tapping that till you get to 255. But done. Now you haven't set your black point yet. You need to click that black point and drag it up. This thing up here needs to be black. Those need to be 0. You got a long way to go. Really long way to go. Really. Put back off order. Back off so you get down to around a 1 or a 2 or something like that. Again, back off the side. You can hit the arrow key, which you might be going, okay, you're good. So again, you've got that edge now. Perfect. Say okay. So everybody's got this now, right? How do I then use this guy on the background, and not my shoulder one? All I used this for was to build this line. I don't care about the hand. If you do, again, double click on the hand tool, you kick back out. All I wanted to build was this edge right here. I don't care what's going on in the rest of this. I don't give a shit about any of this. All I wanted was to build this edge. It is what is missing in my blue background. This edge is what is missing, is that guy right here. How do I then use this to fix that? Exactly. If I load this thing as a selection, how do I load this thing as a selection? I command click on it. It is now loaded this as an active selection. You can see the little marching ants. When you have a selection in the areas that were white are the areas, again, this is yet another mask. This is now the active part of the selection. If I go to paint on this thing, the area that is in white will actually is paintable. To prove this to you, do this. Actually put a brand new layer up on top of Sunny. Just add a blank layer up on top. Hit the B key to get a paintbrush. Hit the D key to default your colors to black and white, and then just paint on this layer, and you'll see what happens. That layer is constricting. That layer is not letting me paint outside that edge. This is the active selection. It is letting me paint in this area because that area was the white area. When I loaded it as a selection, this is the white area, so it's allowing me to actually paint on that. If you've done this, you can throw that layer away. I was just using that to actually show you what was going on here. But now that we've loaded this as a selection, you can come back to your blue background. You can zoom into this area right here with the B key, a paintbrush. Make sure that it is a normal brush. In this case, I would go ahead and make it a hard brush, but it doesn't really matter because the selection is controlling this edge. And then I'm simply going to come in here and paint this edge. But there's a caveat. I need everybody to look at this really quickly. You see when I painted that in, it actually left a soft edge here. That soft edge I want. That soft edge is an indication that that's the fuzziness of the sweater. However, it's also a partial selection. When I built this selection, because it's based on the luminosity of this is a partial selection. So when I painted it, you only got like a gray color in here. You didn't get a black. However, if you hit this a second time, you will continue to build density in there. As you continue to hit this over and over and over again, that would be a mistake. You do not want to do that. You went to all the trouble to build that soft edge. Repeated hits of this are a problem. So I'm going to go back in history to where I get to here. I went back to when I deleted my layer. Back to this blue layer. I'm going to actually zoom so I can see this entire stroke, so I can hit this with one single stroke. So again, the B key is the brush. I've got a hard brush in here, normal blending mode for this, 100% opacity, 100%, ooh, that is the wrong brush. Hard brush, go ahead and say, okay, that really threw me. I'm gonna simply click on this and paint one stroke. That gives me that edge. And again, you can go back and forth as long as you don't pick up your mouse. If you pick up your mouse and drop it down, it's when you start to build that density. And then Command D to deselect and simply fill in the rest of it. You built the edge. The edge is done. The rest of it, you just fill in. This temporary shoulder has done its work. Throw it away. You'll get confused. You'll end up with way too many layers that you're trying to work with here. Click on this blue background, double click on the hand, and you've got the beginnings of an excellent mask. Yes. Yeah. Look at this. This girl is, so that part of the homework is done. Killed it. Okay, one final thing, because I have not completed my mask, but I'm just going to show you here. One last thing really quick. This is how I want you to actually use this guy. So again, I have not finished my mask, but you guys can bear with me. You guys can see this. So I'm going to duplicate Sunny. I'm going to rename this blue background. I am going to load my blue background mask. I'm not going to select the channel. I'm simply hovering over it. I don't even have its eyeball on. I'm going to hold down the Command key, click on it. It loads Sunny as a selection. Come up to the blue background and simply add layer mask. If you turn off this Sunny, you'll actually see that this has selected your blue background. It's exactly what we wanted. Again, you've got to finish refining this mask. But does this make sense where we're going here? If you invert this mask, you'll see one last problem that we'll talk about really quickly. Command I to, I'll actually invert this, turn on this white background. You'll see what we call spill. It's this blue tint that's right here. I'm going to show you how to remove spill next week. So you do not need to remove the spill on this image, but I'll show you how to, well, okay. We're supposed to end this class right this second. I've got 1 minute to change your life. Do you want me to do that? How do you fix the spill? Really quickly, this is how you fix the spill. This is a destructive move. It's going to be destructive on this layer. However, if you hit the B key to get a brush, I want to sample Sunny's hair color. To sample her hair color, you either pick the color, the foreground color picker, and click on her hair. That will select her hair color that way. Or with the B key selected, you simply hold down the Option key, and you get the color picker, the temporary color picker. So select that. Come up to your blending mode for your brush and come down to color. Change the blending, the hardness of this brush to soft. Still 100% opacity, 100% flow. You are working on the image layer, not on the mask, but on the image layer. You can see you've got the bracket keys around there. I'm going to make my brush slightly larger. I'm going to move it down to actually go after this area. I'm on the Sunny layer, and I'm simply going to paint out the spill. Are you fucking kidding me? Boom! This work is now worth $300 an hour. It wasn't enough that you could knock it out. You could also get the spill gone. Yeah. And we got to go. All right. So I know the first 3 weeks was rough. That was today. A little something for the effort, you know? Okay, and really quickly, I'm going to change screens so that you can check to make sure that your homework did get dropped. So this is the homework that I've got right here. If you don't see your name up here, oh wait, sorry. That's not the homework. This is the homework right here that I've got. If you don't see your name up here, I don't have it. This that we're working on is 4.1. The Sunny assignment is 4.1. You're not turning that in now. This is the homework you turned in for that you were doing last week. And then we got to get out of here, folks. So start wrapping it up.